Thanks for listening to this episode of Fluff and Crunch. Today, Chris and I talk about what I'm calling WotC's strategic withdrawal in the Great OGL War of 2023. That is their response, the release of their draft new OGL, and our thoughts about it. And this will be the last episode we'll do on this for a while, as we talk about in the episode. Thanks as always for listening. All right, we are recording. Hello, how are you doing today, Chris?
Good, thanks, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm well. How's your gaming over the last week, if you had any?
I did well. We spent nothing the whole of yesterday. We were playing board games. Me, Mika, and Annie. We played a whole bunch of board games the whole day. So relaxing day playing board games. Although they kept being other, we had to keep doing the lounge, so doing it on the floor. So my knees were killing me this morning. That was not good. And yeah, we played our third session of our big D&D campaign. So this was the second session of Brian's because we hadn't got to a place where we wanted to leave it last week. So then we played another episode. And again, we didn't even get to where Brian was hoping we would get to. It's a bit more sandboxy what we're doing with him. So it was like, because he's kind of just dropping things for us to look into. Maybe we're looking into things more one way and less the other. And so the thing that he wanted us to get to, we didn't get to. But yeah, it was good. Good fun. How about you?
Second session, got into some second session again as a player. I'm learning how to be a player. It's fascinating how when a new campaign starts out, and I think I'm hearing this in what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's always that period early on where regardless of what the GM has planned, like this is the vibe and this is what's going to happen, this is the type of story, how things are going to unfold, and regardless of what the players think their characters are all about, there's a period of time where both sides work out what's this vibe going to be and how is this actually going to flow. So we're definitely in that, but it was fun. We had we're getting deeper into the story, so yeah, and we ended at a good point too. It was a good like scene, end of an episode point in the story. So we're gonna have some people out though, unfortunately, for the next, like on and off for the next 2 weeks or so. So this week we're not gonna play, and the weekend after we won't play. But we at least we got two sessions in, and it's been fun. It's been I feel like I'm starting to get used to the idea of being a player and not being a GM, which means
I'm really enjoying it, but I think I'm partly enjoying it because the fact that it also links to a world that I'm helping to make. I mean, there was a funny point last week when we realized Brian had said, like, the arena happens at every full moon. And then we're going, well, wait a minute. How many moons are there and how often are there? And we were Brian was like, well, I don't know. And I was like, it's fair. We need to do it together. And Scott was like, no, what are the moons? And I was like, well, Scott, it's our world. So you now have to help him answer that question. He was like, oh. So yeah, I think having that bit of involvement in the overall world is helping, but also there's only 3 of us. So there's literally, you're not doing that thing. Like I say, I hate as a player. Last time I played D&D when there was, 4 people in the party. And so you wait.
Yeah, you do a lot of sitting.
And you wait. When there's only 2 of us, it's like, also we're not doing a lot of combat. Scott goes, monster goes, it's super quick. There's no waiting because it's such a small group. So yeah, I don't think I could cope with being in a big part. I'd just get bored, and I'm not getting bored now because we're always involved. So I'm enjoying it so far.
Good, very good. So we're gonna talk about the Ogle.
Yeah, well, we said, didn't we, that I didn't want to talk about it a bit. We talked about the hoo-ha. Yes. That was kind of my feeling, that there was a lot of people kicking off, but it was a leak. Initial... Yeah. Now, the funny thing is that the language the Wizards have used since has been very clear that essentially to say, well, because they could have just come out and go, no, that was leaked. That was never meant for public use, blah, blah, blah. They haven't. No. They have apologized. It's been terrible. Their apologies have been very much what this, I have to look at the phrase occasionally, the gaslighting, where they've kind of gone like, no, it's not our way. You misunderstood what we intended the OGL to be, so it's your fault, not our fault. It's like they have apologized.
You hear a bad apology. You're hearing a bad apology when you hear someone say like, "I'm sorry that you."
Yes.
Like, wait, hold on. I'm sorry that you interpreted it that way. So it's like, wait, no, you were an ass.
Yeah.
and I didn't interpret it that you were just an ass.
So
Yeah,
some stuff's still gone. Like all the stuff about royalties gone.
yeah.
Now
Well,
that's not people misinterpreting what the royalties was intended for. That's
well,
them taking the royalties out.
let's quick back up, because we could possibly have a new listener. We've had, since we put up the video on YouTube, you liked it. That was pretty good stuff. I like that. And a few other people have. And I think we've had maybe, I don't know. Last time I checked, we had 11 people view it. Now, I don't know if those are people new to us or people who are like, I've been listening to these clowns for the last year and a half.
Right,
and I want to see what their mugs.
I can tell you what some of those people are. I made the mistake today of we were related to it in my media class. And
Oh my goodness.
I said something, and I said like, "Oh, I do a podcast." They went, "No, you don't." I was like, "No, I do a podcast." And I was like, "Oh, and we've done a YouTube channel for it." And someone said, "What's it called?" And rather than just going, "You don't need to know that," I said the name. They all instantly went on, found the YouTube thing. They were like, "Oh, we're all subscribing." I was like,
Great. Now,
yeah, we went from 3 subscribers to 10 because
what age group do you?
They're 16, 17-year-olds.
Great. Hi, kids.
So I like most of them. Generally, 2 of them actually do play D&D, but the rest would have no interest. I was like, there is no point you subscribing to this or watching to it or listening to the podcast.
No, it's strange amusement. Look, a good friend of mine,
interested.
Good golly, years ago, when I did my student teaching, during Bill Clinton's first term as president. Go scurry, kids. Find out when that was. When I did my student teaching, my closest friend then, he used to say how odd it was. Like, we would go out, we'd go do something at night or whatever. And he was bemused by the idea that he was out with a teacher. And he joked, he's like, I used to think that the principal's only job was to go around and deflate all the teachers at the end of the night and stuff them back into their desks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You live well outside of where you teach, correct?
Yeah, pretty. Yeah, I very rarely,
right,
if ever.
You very. I used to see my kids all the time, and so it was kind of amusing initially. Like when you get them for the first, and they'd see you out in public, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm buying chicken." What does this strike you as odd? Yes, okay. I'm putting gas in my truck. What? Anyway. So a little bit of a background, real quick, for those of you who might be new to us or missed the last our episode on our insightful journalism that we provided in the last episode. Not the last, but we talked about the OGL. We talked about, as you said, I think a very apt term is dust up, the poop storm, as people, especially the Twitter denizens, have reacted. They've gotten out their digital pitchforks and their NFT torches to go burn down the NFT windmill. We've now gotten. We talked about that. Talked about like what had been mentioned and what reactions were from the community to the leaked OGL. And you're absolutely right. They can't go back, and to their credit, they haven't said, well, you didn't understand that, or that was a draft, or whatever. Like, it was obvious they had already negotiated terms with Kickstarter.
Yeah.
They were, it's obvious that leaked version from December was what they were preparing to release. Maybe they would make some changes, but that it seems to me that what came out last month was an expression of their view that they were going to take unilateral action, and everyone was just going to sit and wait, and then they were going to release this, and then this was going to usher in a new normal for OGL producers and the company and revenue and blah 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 blah, all that kind of stuff. And then we have the dust up, and now we have WotC finally releases something else. They release what they're actually explicitly calling a draft. It has that word watermarked across it, so that must mean it's a draft. And they have opened up a survey so that people can read it, and they can, they'll say, we'll read all the comments. Although I think that's an interesting, that's a verbal or a linguistic sleight of hand. Yeah, you can read the comments, but it doesn't mean you're going to act on them. So that's what we're gonna talk about a little bit today, is the release of the draft, the reaction to the draft, and our thoughts about these things. So what were some of the things? Boil it down to the key points. What's in this draft that that's different from the leaked unilateral version?
I think the key thing is that any mention of royalties is well, it's not in there. But essentially, in the accompanying documentation they've released on D&D Beyond, they've said that's gone. We're not doing that. We're not doing royalties anymore. Release what you want. We're not going to try and come after your money.
However, I'll come back to that.
Yeah. So that was a biggie. The other big thing is that they've kind of said that, right, they're gonna wrap up the SRD, whatever version it will, under a Creative Commons license, and then they kind of said, right, so there are no limitations on it at all. We will make it Creative Commons, which means anyone can use it, and it becomes then an attribution thing. And then to that kind of thing, you can kind of almost even avoid the OGL altogether, because that stuff is Creative Commons, means that anyone can use it, and therefore you don't really have to. I mean, that kind of stuff then basically says the OGL becomes irrelevant if you're using that stuff. So that's that's kind of weird. There's bits and pieces of legal jargon at the end. One thing which I definitely will come back to, because I've seen it commented on a lot online, is there's stuff about it's the hateful content or conduct. Second one being a bit weird. Now, that was still in there in the OGL. This is still a thing they're pushing, trying to say essentially that one of the reasons they have to have a new OGL is that the old OGL didn't allow them to any control over what people were saying. And this is still something that people are not happy about, essentially because, the stuff about we don't want anything that's harmful, discriminatory, illegal, obscene, harassing, or to engage in conduct that is harmful, discriminatory, illegal, obscene, harassing. People aren't, people are like, okay, yeah, fair enough. I see where you're coming from. It's the fact that we said we have the sole right to decide what conduct or content is hateful. So essentially what they're saying is, maybe they don't realize it, or maybe they do. But the problem with that is, it's not even a freedom of speech thing. It's the fact that they get to decide what they don't like about what you've said. And then this is where you open you can almost do a whole episode on that. Yeah. Because, people straight away were putting stuff up about the idea that, well, let's pick a gay marriage thing. It's the easy thing. You have a gay character in a game. That's fine in most of Europe. No, that's not even true. It's not even all of Europe. That's fine in, essentially, there are parts of the world that would not be okay with. They don't want a gay character. Parts of the Middle East, parts of Europe. Yep. I guess some states in America would not be super happy with that. So then what happens if those people who don't like it are in charge of Wizards of the Coast, or the other way around? What happens if, those people, someone's gone really over the top and either way, that then starts becoming awkward. So what you do, you then have to have the, because then it's not even a case of like, well, we have to be, woke or PC or whatever, because you might upset. So would you put nothing in there? Yeah. Nothing could be in there that might upset anyone, because so that makes it awkward.
My initial reaction to, all the things you just said, I think, the royalty piece is gone. However, the fact that Wizards still, and look, I think, facts don't care about feelings, and they don't, suck it up. You cannot like what a company decides to produce, or the price tag they put on it, or the color, whatever. You cannot like that, but you can't force that company to not do what they want to do. That's within the limits of the law. And if WotC wants to charge a royalty, they're within their legal authority as the IP owners and trademark owners to, copyright it all. So they can do that. Now, if it generates such ill will, like it has, they may choose not to. However, it still seems to me that there's this debate over in the original OGL that it's irrevocable. And there's this argument over, does that mean that version of the OGL is irrevocable, or the idea that there is an OGL is revocable or is not revocable? So in other words, like if you say to your kid, I promise you will always have a car. I will always provide you with a car. Does that necessarily mean that the car I gave you is the one I'm going to provide you with, or just a car, and I get to define what the card is? Or car rather. So there's still this question over, okay, WotC yanked royalties now. Does that mean, do they retain the authority to, we still have to have an OGL, but we get to decide what we put in the box? So that doesn't mean they can't change it in the future. That's what it seems like to me. They've also announced they're going to move the core mechanic to Creative Commons license. Okay, but my understanding, and we'll put links to these. There are two videos in particular. We'll put links in the notes to. This lawyer he must be American. He doesn't have a Canadian English accent. He definitely does. Anyway, he talked about how in U.S. patent law, U.S. copyright law, rather, you cannot copyright a process.
Yeah.
Like in this case, you can't copyright game rules. Now the trouble with D&D is that things like classes and the names for them and all the extra stuff that comes with them, that there's a murky area as to where that
Yeah.
how much ownership WotC has over those things. But the idea of rolling 3 six-sided dice to try to meet or beat a difficulty number or difficulty rating or whatever, like that actually cannot be patented. All the language that gets attached to it perhaps could be trademarked, or if it's IP material, then it could be copyrighted. But what I find odd is, WotC's making this big deal about how, we're going to release this to Creative Commons. And my thought is, you're going to release something that you actually can't copyright anyway. That to me seems like like I'm throwing bones at people, and yet they don't realize they already have access to them.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway from that legal video, that essentially they're trying to kind of give an open license to something, which essentially, and now by doing it through Creative Commons, which means, like, fact that when they release Creative Commons, the license then kind of goes out the window, because why do you need the license if it's Creative Commons? But from what the guy was saying, essentially, because the stuff that they're saying you can use is mechanics anyway, they didn't need to say that. You could always do that. Like you said, where there's that gray area it's the stuff that, like class names. So if you're just creating a brand new class, or if you're creating, like when I said, like the Hellboy role-playing or those spy games, things which are, the classes are totally new. So it's actually the only thing that is the same as the general gist of how the game works. They can't do anything about those games because they're not claiming to be 5e products. They're not even claiming to be compatible. They're kind of, based on blah, blah, blah. Well, then they can't do anything about those.
But like the example that one
see.
thing though, if you want to work, and I think this is where the OGL, regardless of, this brings up a question to me over whether or not there are whole pieces of the OGL that are held dearly to people, like the idea that I can publish under the same system. You know what? Maybe you didn't need an OGL to do that.
Yes.
But I completely forgot what I was going to say. It was very profound.
But yeah, I think that was an important takeaway I got from those kind of things, that essentially said you don't need the OGL because the stuff they're trying to protect and is doing. Really, the OGL was there to kind of say, if you put we're using the OGL on it, essentially if you put the OGL on the front of your game, you were saying that other people could copy it, but they didn't need to, but you were making it easy. Or here's the stuff that is going to, essentially, like you link it to the SID. Here's the stuff we're going to let you talk about quite happily. So but
now, correct me if I'm wrong on this. The understanding, it seems like the understanding is where you're limited is you can't do things like, as one example in one of the videos we watched was like, you couldn't create new sub races to a race that is like D&D IP, or class subclasses, things like.
Yeah, I think that's where you get the interesting thing of. Yeah. Particularly with the classes, those class words are so generic, I don't think you can trademark them. And I think it's basically the same with the race names, kind of, orc, dwarf, elf. Those aren't IPs owned by Wizards of the Coast. They're not their words. This is why Games Workshop went beyond what they've done. They renamed all of their races. So they weren't orcs anymore. They were uruks.
Right.
They were elves with an A on the front.
They created an IP so that they can recreate these commonly known entities within it, but then say, no, we put a little spin on it. Those are ours. Yeah.
So that got me thinking about what actually is the IP, because obviously the logo, Dungeons and Dragons, that's like, you can't release things, say this is a Dungeons and Dragons product, because you don't own that IP.
Yeah.
But when you start like, well, what is the IP then? Well, there's a handful of characters that were written about in novels that presumably they have the IP for those, but they're not using those characters anymore. So then what else? Well, there's a handful of monsters. Like the spells, you can't copyright the spell. You can't copyright Fireball. It's a word.
But things
there might
like
be particular spells, like more
Tensor's floating disc and
exactly.
crap like that. The things that where they have they've wrapped their IP into these. Into these other things, they can. Now, if you want to have like Bob's levitation assistant, that's different.
But those things end up being so few and far between. I started thinking, actually, well, I feel like they think they've got more IP than they have. And actually what they need to be doing, this will go on to another thing. There's only one big other thing from the OGL we'll come back to, really. But they started getting me thinking like, well, maybe they don't have as much IP as they think they have. A lot of it is certain monsters, displacer beasts and beholders. But those are the kind of things that people who are in the D&D world, they know those creatures, and therefore they know those. And so, and there's a thing later on which says, well, you can use the stats for one of these in your product, but you can't use our artisan. You have to create your own likeness or whatever. Well, that's fair enough. But that's what it comes down to. Their IP is a handful of characters which they're not writing stories about, and a handful of monsters. And then the logo, the name has a lot of IP. So clearly they've decided they need to earn more money. But then you think, well, this is a toy company. So why aren't you doing the obvious thing and releasing toys? You're Hasbro. Why don't you release a series of toys? And actually, you're about to have this film come out. So you release the film. Why aren't you releasing comics related to each of these characters? Why aren't they each getting a tie-in novel? Why aren't you releasing cuddly toys and action figures for all the stuff that's going to be? Maybe they are. This probably is. But then build on that and make the IP bigger. Because at this point, I'm linking it. I feel like Critical Role has a more important, more valuable IP than Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, now Critical Role piggybacks off D&D. But Critical Role have 3 sets of campaigns, each of which has a bunch of characters, and each of those have Funko Pop models and T-shirts you can buy, and pins.
And do they not? No, isn't that the Amazon series? Is that
and an Amazon series which they kickstarted, which made a fortune? Amazon,
but
bought it for
they've expanded. So what you're saying is they've created their own IP within the greater D&D world. They have. And they have expanded it to make it marketable products that can be consumed by lots of different kinds of people. Who knows? Maybe Hasbro, maybe they're going to make little toys or something like that. Or maybe they maybe they're interested in expanding, like they said, that whole under-monetized thing. Well, I think that the guy in the D&D Shorts video had a good explanation. If you haven't watched it yet, like I said, we'll have the link. A good explanation of all the money that they could hope to make through digital platforms. And, I personally, I don't like the idea of ever renting, of always renting something, because if you have a subscription to something and that's how you access it, you are forever a renter.
Yeah.
I don't download music. Now I buy it on vinyl. It's mine, period. You can't remove song lyrics. You can't make a song not available. It's mine. I can do with it what I want. But I think a lot of people nowadays are very used to the idea of forever subscribing to something and, paying $10 or $15 or $20 a month. And then they get access to all these things and tiers of access and things like that. Maybe WotC is hoping that that's where they're going to make gobs of money off people.
I mean, the most recent D&D Shorts video seems to be really going down that. And also, we know they're going to do that. They said when they announced One D&D, they said they were going to push that. I do think that, I think they overestimate how many people are going to use it. Because essentially, if you are sitting around a table with your friends, D&D Beyond, there are people that use D&D Beyond to play in person.
Yes.
Simply because D&D Beyond does a good job of recording your character sheet, and the GM can see everybody else's character sheets, and that kind of thing. But then people pretty still roll the dice in person.
Yep.
And I haven't done that because I have a PDF that has my character sheet on it, and then I print it and I do it on paper.
I like paper.
And that's going to be how the vast majority of people play D&D. Now, there are going to be people that do play D&D online and they use, Roll20 or whatever else.
Right.
Or they just play on D&D Beyond. And yes, so there is a market for those people to go and play on a virtual tabletop. But the minute you start asking for silly amounts of money, people won't do it. Now, if they're going to try and find a way that to say, right, other VTTs can't be used, people can just play. I've played D&D. I didn't use a VTT. We tried. Scott couldn't get Roll20 to work, so we played through Discord. For various lockdowns. I heard some. Yeah, various lockdowns for 2 years on and off. We played through Discord.
Right.
We talked to each other. We threw maps onto a Google Slides thing, and we typed things into the Discord chat with bots, and we managed. We didn't need some fancy VTT.
No.
So the
Well, I
idea
think
that
there's
everyone is going to use it. I mean, what I've seen of it, it looks great. I feel like they're trying to go after a computer game market. People that
Could-
like computer games, they're going to try and get them into D&D.
could
But I still think they're missing that the vast majority of people are the people that have no idea the OGL is in a crisis because they don't know what the OGL is.
Right.
They've gone in, they've seen Critical Role, or they've watched the cartoon, or they're going to see the films, or they've watched Stranger Things, and they've gone and bought a D&D starter set and a handful of dice, and they're playing with their friends. None of this was ever going to affect them.
They could be playing with their friends in person or online. And whoever the GM is using some VTT, or as you said, is using some other means of doing this. I think the trouble is, and I'm guessing, I totally am guessing here, but it seems to me like the top level, the executive level leadership is making decisions about how people play these games,
Yeah,
that doesn't take into account the incredibly diverse set of, call it, gaming experiences that people have.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what they're trying to do is funnel a hugely disproportionate amount of the gaming activity through one ring to rule them all kind of thing. That's what it sounds like they're assuming they're going to be able to do. And I think that it demonstrates a misunderstanding of, again, that diversity of experience, people playing all different kinds of ways. But I also think it demonstrates a gross misunderstanding of your core tabletop RPG audience. I just don't think, I don't know. It doesn't seem like you would have the people who, like you and I, and the 20-somethings and 30-somethings who have come to these games recently because of those things that you mentioned. It doesn't sound to me like, it just doesn't seem like they would be that, you would draw in that many people. I mean, it seems to me, and I've read plenty of articles about this, that part of the interest and allure of playing tabletop games now is that they offer human interaction. Sitting around a table with people. Now, obviously, VTTs grew tremendously during the pandemic. Duh, that makes sense. But there's still, again, people found ways to play. They didn't necessarily go to one source. Oh, I have to use this one system to play remotely with my friends. People do all kinds of different things. So it just seems to demonstrate a lack of understanding of the types of people and the things that motivate them to play these kinds of games, and the things that lots of people seem to want to get out of these games. And I'm convinced that a part of it is there's a creative urge. People want to tell stories, but there's also a desire among a lot of people to just be around people. And the idea that they're going to have, conjecture over solo play. Wait, solo play role play, that's not a tabletop role playing game. If you're playing a solo role playing game on a computer, you're actually not playing a traditional tabletop role playing game. You're playing a video game.
I think people have done it and they've seen, there's clearly enough people that play, have tried to play something. Or like, I've played DM-less, but I think it's a niche of a niche. I don't see that's even a way to go.
You played it with someone else.
Yeah. Whenever I've even thought about doing it by myself, I've always thought I could just play a computer game. That's
all you're doing. Maybe they think that blurring the lines will attract more people whose primary interest in gaming is what we would call video games. I don't know.
I think that's what I think they're trying to go after more. They're trying. It's what we said. We know because they said it. They didn't say, but it's everyone has said it. It is under monetized. I just think they've gone about it the wrong way. Clearly, like you said, they're trying to funnel everyone into their new fancy virtual tabletop. The fact that the OGL has a whole page just for the virtual tabletop, which, to be honest, they could put anything on there because I'm not hugely bothered. I can't see myself ever, actually, if they knocked one up where you could play it by yourself, which was basically like playing a computer game, but you leveled your character using D&D rules, that might be quite cool. But, and if no one else offers that and they're the only ones offering that. But again, they've had to pedal back some of the stuff they were doing because originally, it looked at one point, they would kind of go, well, you cannot have D&D in your VTT. Well, they're not saying that anymore. They're kind of just saying, well, there's bits and pieces you can't do in yours. essentially like Roll20 and all the others could carry on as they are at the moment, but they can't develop much further because Wizards of the Coast want this fully 3D thing where, and we know exactly what they're going for, where you can design your own characters and make them look like, but they're still not going to get enough money unless there's a subscription. Because yes, you're going to have microtransactions to be able to buy, little bits of items for you and clothing and change what your character looks like. The players still aren't going to be spending their money unless they can subscribe. If you start asking them people to pay, this number was dropped about $30, and they had a thing that said, well, we will not be asking $30 for D&D Beyond. And you think it's exactly what the D&D shorts guys say. No one's saying it's going to be $30 for D&D Beyond. It's $30 for this new thing.
Well, you could also be a weasel and say, well, we're only asking $29.99. That's not $30. Look,
it's still going to be, we know it's still going to be the dungeon master that pays the most thing. At the moment, D&D Beyond, to the best of my knowledge, works, if the dungeon master pays for all the books, then he sets up a campaign with those books, then the players get access to all of that material. So the money still falls onto the dungeon master. And I imagine the vast majority of their money would fall onto the dungeon master in this again.
Or maybe they would, and this is just conjecture again, maybe they're considering, decreasing what they charge to dungeon masters and then charging player, trying to even out I don't know. I mean,
that would be nice, but I don't see it.
I want to focus on the whole hate speech thing, because it's so Orwellian. I find it fascinating, and I'd mentioned this. I think this was in a recorded segment last time we talked about this. I don't know if it was that or it was offline, but I find it disingenuous of them, and I'm glad to see places like Paizo are calling them out on this. Their claim that this was the primary motivation. They suddenly move it to the top of the list. It wasn't on the list. It was mentioned, but it was not something that seemed to be a prominent piece of it. Suddenly now it becomes the prominent piece. Like, oh no, we're trying to protect everybody. I'm sorry, but in 22 years of OGL stuff, can you remember? Like, okay, this whole
this is a perfect example of the. I haven't. If there was anything like, I am not aware of it. The stuff I'm aware of is stuff that is only tangentially to do with 5e, which is like the crazy, not stuff.
And was that new? Like, the
TSR,
company,
the new
TSR,
or
Neo or whatever the hell it's called. This other company that wants to call itself TSR and supposedly wants to put out another version of Star Frontiers, which was a TSR title from 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And seems to be run by
not
a
linked.
Seems.
Yeah, that's not linked to 5e or the OGL.
No, not at all.
Anyway. The worst stuff that I'm aware of that has actually come out has come from them. So just looking at Curse of Strahd, I read this somewhere and then I thought about it. They're absolutely right. You have examples of grooming because that's what Strahd does. You have examples of like various other, I think I said necrophil, but I'm not sure about that. You definitely have an example of straight up racism and racially aggravated like attempted murder, because there is a character, I'm not going to do it for spoil, but there is a character that keeps a saber-toothed tiger in a caravan that he has trained to attack the people that are essentially like a semi-nomadic gypsy race. That's awful. At the time when I played it, I was like, that's perfectly natural. They work for Strahd, therefore they're the bad guys, and this guy's fighting a bad guy. But if you actually think into it, you think that is straight up racist. He is training this tiger to attack a race.
Well, yeah,
Wizards of the Coast.
And so here's
put that in.
Here's my take on it, because I remember that. I mean, I ran Curse of Strahd ages ago when it first came out. Like me personally, he's a villain. Villain's going to do villainous stuff. Like I couldn't care less. Like that does not bother me one bit. But you bring up a really good point. The only thing that you can think of, and I don't remember there being some kind of a dust up like, oh my gosh, some OGL publisher, let's say, and I'm not going to drop any names because I don't want people to say, oh, he said it. No. What if a prominent OGL publisher over the last 20 years I can't think of any time that something came out from a prominent publisher, from any publisher, and it was met with some kind of resistance over, oh my gosh, this is sexist, racist, this is, that is, whatever is. This seems to me to be WotC's attempt to grab something and wave around in the faces of people because they think that'll gin up support. This is why we're really doing it. But you bring up the case to the very clear point that I'm glad. It's like there's some sense of like honesty among people, regardless of their call them like socio-political preferences, to recognize like, wait. You're saying you don't want these things, but you're saying you're the sole arbiter of what they are. And you're also saying that no one can complain if you decide to shut someone down. I'm going to draw a historical parallel here. That in the 1760s, when British Parliament was dumping all these taxes on the American colonists, one of the things, they didn't like any of the taxes, regardless of their validity. They didn't like the taxes. But one of the things that really torqued the colonists was that when Parliament said, okay, we're going to get rid of this, but we also want to reinforce the fact that we can get rid of it because we reserve the right to tax you on anything whenever we want to. So we're not going to tax you on this, but by the way, we could, if we want to do this in the future, we can. Like, how to piss off people 101. You accept the pressure they're giving you, but you really actually don't fully accept it. And that to me is what WotC is doing right here. They're saying, oh yeah, we're trying to protect you from this, but by the way, we're the ones who, we reserve the power to determine how that's decided. And that's just garbage.
Again, it doesn't need to be the OGL for a simple reason. If it's a product that is made which just says it is compatible with 5e, it cannot say Dungeons and Dragons on it. It can't say Wizards of the Coast on it. It can only have reference. It is compatible with the world's favorite thing. So straight away, anyone can realize this is not related. This is not a Dungeons and Dragons official product. So because of that, it's not got blowback on Wizards of the Coast anyway.
This notion that someone, like, let's say, Jim Bob Press is going to put out like some supplement under the OGL that is, I don't know, I'll get crazy here. How's that? Like, it has a whole class of like a class and subclasses of like Klansmen, KKK. All right. And the KKK is the hero in this new setting or something just absolutely wackadoo like that. And so essentially WotC is saying, well, you know what? That's going to harm our brand. Bunk.
Yeah.
People online would pile on that so quickly, and WotC would come out and make statements so quickly. No one is going to be confused. Oh my gosh, D&D puts out like clan stuff. No one is going to be confused about that. Like, it's just such a flimsy, lame excuse that it's like you have to be a blithering idiot to go, oh yeah, that's why they were really doing it. Oh yeah.
So then the alternative is you put out stuff under DM's Guild, in which case, well, they've always been out. It's been always pretty clear that they had control of what you put out anyway and could pull it at any point.
Right.
So I think
the DM's Guild can. People looking at your stuff on DM's Guild can flag it. DM's Guild can pull it. And then it's like what this.
I mean, that's the weird thing. You're going to have this new creator product thing. Now that would be a difference, but it's like, but no one asked for these creator product badges. People have been putting out stuff for 5e for 10 years without any official badges or anything. And people knew that it was for 5e because it was clear.
You know what that is? That's bread and circuses.
And no one ever said it was. So they're trying to put this creative, oh, look, we'll let you do it now without going to a DM's Guild.
You feel special now.
Yeah, they're trying to put more control of what you're saying. What they've done now is a step in the right direction. But the reality is there's nothing wrong with the current OGL other than, and everyone knows that every time they keep trying to peel up, oh no, we're trying to protect people. We got to do this. Oh, there's new technologies. Most of the stuff they want to do is either the OGL didn't cover it and still won't, or it was covered by the original OGL. So I still feel like they don't really need it. They're still trying to, they've basically pedaled back almost all of the OGL, with the exception of they're now putting all these VTT restrictions, which you think, well, fair enough to some extent. If they're trying to make sure that people who play D&D play it on their VTT, then let them. But can you actually make it sure that other people can't play on another VTT using 50? You can make it difficult for them, but by not releasing all the stuff. But they've got deals with Roll20 and some of these other ones. So it's like they're screwing over their partners. This is part of the thing. This is part of the thing with Critical Role, that Critical Role have not been able to come out and properly lambast them for it because they have all these hookups with D&D Beyond and with them having, literally there are 2 official Wizards of the Coast books which are linked to Critical Role, which puts them in an awkward position. Well, Critical Role could walk away if they wanted to.
But also they have agreements with D&D that sit outside of the OGL.
Yes.
It's like when, with Modifius releasing their 2D20 World Builders program, And Chris Birch made it very clear, like, yeah, you know, this program through drive-through is for a very broad category of possible products, but a specific type of product. And if you want to sit outside that, in terms of the setting, the content, the whatever, or other form, then you go to them like you would any company, and you negotiate a license with them directly that sits outside of this. Yeah, I think that this is a shell game, is what it sounds like to me. That WotC realized they are not happy with the response, is what it seems like, because they want to make more money. And they've
done the opposite.
Yes, they've done the opposite. They are now moving the shells around, and they're trying to activate the lizard brain of the community as they perceive it, to try to blow the dust that they blew up under the carpet. And I think that's why they're waving around this hate speech garbage. And I'm, like I said before, I'm glad that it doesn't seem to be gaining traction. And just because one or two people tweet about it does not mean a darn thing. Like
yeah, I mean, this new version of OGL to me, I don't think it needs to exist. To be honest, I don't really access stuff through the OGL. Okay, I know there's lots of people who go, well, even if you do or don't, you should care for the people that do. I get that actually. If there's people that, well, I think it's like I said last time, if there are people that are really using the OGL and it's super important to their business, what that probably means is you are trying to make a ton of money out of 5e, which really is someone's product, and you're trying to piggyback on it. If that company is then going to try and make it harder for you, there's a part of me that says, well, it's their product. If you're that confident in your own product, release it. I mean, this is what Paizo have done to me, because they did Pathfinder first edition, which was just straight up it. Pathfinder second edition steps away so much. My understanding is that essentially it doesn't use the OGL. The OGL is in the Pathfinder second edition. So if you want to work on Pathfinder second edition, you are using the OGL, which is why they're moving to this thing, which I guess we'll talk about some other point.
Yeah, well, when more detail comes out
but
about
essentially,
it.
Pathfinder 2e doesn't use the OGL and doesn't need it. They moved away to it to avoid it. All these other companies that are, you know, like I said, they might have their livelihoods harmed. Okay, I feel a bit bad for them, but what you should really be doing is like what Kobold's doing then, and going, well, we're not going to rely on this OGL, which we don't know what's happening. We're going to make our own product and have faith in your own product. I was always kind of a bit like, when I remember looking at DM's Guild thinking, I can release through DM's Guild, which is nice and easy. Or actually, if I avoid DM's Guild, I will get a much bigger, I'll have more of my money. But then it's a whole gray murky area, and it's more difficult. So,
well, I mean, again, there are advantages to putting your stuff on DM's Guild. If you gain a following, if people like your stuff, they will buy your stuff. And there's a whole side of promotions, to say nothing of the logistics of delivery of the product, that you don't have to deal with, that you pay a portion of your revenue toward, but that's buying services. And having the D&D name implied on your product is going to draw more people to it, because it's the elephant in the room. Okay, but I like that. I think it's, again, I've said what I'm going to say about WotC and what they seem to be doing, and the character of the leadership that is pushing these things. But I'm happy to see creators and companies saying, okay, screw it, we will do our own thing. That means that we may well have a blossoming of lots of new and different and interesting systems. We've always had that for settings, but now, I mean, hey, system setting story, system matters. For a certain kind of play experience, system matters. And we've talked about this, I don't believe in a universal system. And I don't like the idea of everything gets slapped with a D20, and it functions in the same way.
This, if I just stick onto that, to me, this feels like Wizards of the Coast not realizing that actually all they have is they're concentrating on the system. They have settings and they have stories. And if they really wanted to go and make the money, why don't they make a live action Dragonlance? Why don't they do a TV show based on Dark Sun? They have all these amazing licenses, but they're not trying to make money out of that. They're convinced because the guy in charge is obsessed with digital. Unfortunately, those people can only see subscription. That's how he make money, subscription-based microtransactions. You have IP. Use your IP. Stop trying to make
I'll,
money
I'll,
out
I'll
of
throw
other
this at
people.
you though. Why do we see so many sequels in movies? And why is there like Fast and Furious number 18? Why do we see so many of these, honestly, these trash-tacular Marvel movies?
You
Um,
haven't watched them. You need to
why do
stop
we?
saying that.
Because they're so bad. Why
You
do?
haven't seen them.
But sequels. What? But because sequels are safe, and
Yeah,
when you
safe,
build
safe and easy.
a product line, sequels are safe.
Yeah.
And so I get if again, and we mentioned this in the first episode when we talked about this. If your guiding principle or your guiding values to make more money, that is going to change your behavior and your decision making over time. And so, why isn't there a Dark Sun whatever? Because they probably look at that and they say, not worth the risk. If we just keep doing more vanilla, Forgotten Realmsy type stuff and put the screws to people online to get them to pay not much, the old saying of like, the frog in the boiling pot of water, it doesn't
Yeah.
hop out because it's slow. You slowly bury people in or crank up the amount of money you're charging them. You put in those digital, the checkout line impulse buys. You start throwing those and but now you can customize the pattern on your character's clothing or whatever. That's only 99 cents extra a month. I can afford less than $1. And people then they pile it up over time. Maybe that's what they're looking at, because at the end of the day, the thing that animates them is making more money, not making a good product.
They want the quick route. It's like after Marvel started being successful with this big franchise model, everybody, like, I remember there was a Tom Cruise Mummy film, and that was meant to be the start of this big franchise, but they skipped the slow build and went straight to franchise. And Warner Brothers did the same thing with DC. We had some.
They also made films. A bad movie.
Yeah,
that didn't help either.
They rushed straight to.
Yeah.
Well, because the trouble is, if you're rushing straight to the franchise, you're not looking at the film. Marvel made a couple of individual films, and slowly those added together to make this idea, which now we have this unwieldy Marvel thing, which probably is causing itself its own problems. That's what Wizards are trying to do. They've kind of, how can we? Right, we've got this stuff. We've got the stuff we could do, but that's hard work. We're not going to, let's just rush to, we'll just take everybody else's money. Other people are making, let's just take the money that other people are making. We'll take all of that money back and we'll whack on this new VTT, because that's the thing that makes money, and we'll make a lot of money. Yeah. And they've missed you need a product. You can't just make money. It's like they literally just want to press a button and turn consumers into dollar signs. They don't want to put the work in that you need to do it. And they've been found out, and they've lost a ton of money because people have canceled their subscriptions.
And now what it sounds like they're doing, and this is my last piece, is that they're backing off. They're trying to pretend that whole, like, we both won, that line that they released, whatever. That sounds like, that sounds like the lame teenage breakup. Like, I love you. I'm just not in love with you. Let's be friends. Let's be the first people who actually be like, that's what it sounds like. And what they're doing is they're trying to make the bad go away. They're trying to make the ugly dust up that they created go away. They're trying to make the ill will go away so that they can figure out a different way to get what they want anyway. But they just really don't want the bad press anymore. So let's just make it go away and pretend everyone's all right. We're all friends. Ha ha. And that's it. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah. So. And the reality is they should have just done nothing. And when 6th edition came out, or whatever, their 5.5, drop their fancy new VTT, and just pour all those D&D Beyond people onto it. And then, like you said, rack up the prices, and it would have worked. And now they've probably screwed themselves. And just like happened with 4th edition, which gave birth to Pathfinder, that's what's happening now. Except that happened after 4th edition, when people went, "Oh, I don't like this." This is happening before 6th edition. Yeah. There's going to be competitors that come out directly with it.
Yep.
And it's their own fault.
What I'm curious about is, will there be, and I doubt like a Critical Role will do this, but will there be some prominent, I mean, they already have companies and whatnot, but I'm like the, these actual play or they're entertainment play is what they are. I'm curious to see if some of those, or if some try to gain prominence by saying, "Hey, we're doing a watch us game for entertainment, and we're not playing D&D. We're playing a totally different system." I wonder if there'll be people who try to plant a flag and rally around that. Who knows?
I think as much as there are, as much as people have moved to Pathfinder and moved to other things, and all of these people are joining Orc and so on, I just don't think. I think the F5e and Wizard of the Coast have the critical mass. I think the one person could do it is exactly what you said, is that if Matt Mercer and his Critical Role buddies said, we are moving away from 5e and we're moving, for the next campaign, for campaign 4, we are moving to this entirely new system that we have written ourselves.
Or they've partnered with Paizo
or partnered with someone else.
Orc.
Yes, then that would cause a shift.
Yeah.
Because I have no doubt in my mind that 5e took a massive boost in popularity, partly because of Stranger Things and partly because of Critical Role.
For sure. Absolutely.
So, who needs who more?
For better and worse.
I suspect at this point that D&D need Critical Role more than the other way around, because Critical Role isn't going anywhere. They don't need to be playing 5th edition. I think they have a lot of fans that don't even play D&D at all.
I think you're probably right.
Whereas, on the flip side, there are plenty of people who play D&D that have never watched Critical Role. So, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see what happens over the next few years.
Yeah, so I think when this Orc thing comes out, we'll take a look at that and see, and we'll do an episode about that.
Yes, we will.
All right. Thanks for sticking with us and listening. You can find Fluff and Crunch on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. That is at Fluff and Crunch Pod, FLUFFN, as in the letter N, Crunch Pod. You can find us there. You can also find the podcast on Anchor. I'll have links to all of these things in the notes below. Join us for our episode next week, which is the first of another 2-part series, in which we're going to talk about skills, the advantages you get from having skills in RPGs and some of the challenges, and some ideas as to solutions for skill-based games.